So cloud security, what is this about? Many of you know, I'm sure everyone here uses Gmail or something similar, maybe Microsoft Outlook or Microsoft Live, something to that effect to house your email. That's hosted in the cloud probably 99% of the time. Any of those sort of email services that people are using, especially if they're SaaS delivered. Even though there's been a huge push to move to the cloud for infrastructure and services, there's still a continuous push. I think the stats say that somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25% of all infrastructure is running from the cloud. But that number obviously reflects that not all infrastructure is in the cloud. And as companies continue to adopt cloud services, obviously cloud security is paramount and important from a day-to-day perspective. Okay, so just a little bit about our agenda here. What we're going to talk about, give an introduction to cloud security, talk about general threats and risks, talk a little bit about cloud security best practices, and introduce the topic of cloud controls matrix and why that is important. So here's a different stat. Even though systems are not all in the cloud, 60% of world corporate data may be stored in the cloud. And that could be a copy of on-premise or on-site systems are in the cloud. Cloud data centers account for 3% of energy consumption in the world. That's pretty significant. 90% of large enterprises have a multi-cloud infrastructure, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And that might mean certain providers, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, or what's referred to as Azure. And the cloud market, from an applications point of view, is worth somewhere in the neighborhood of over $150 billion. So what really is cloud security? It makes up policies, technologies, applications, what's referred to as controls, and something you would learn about if you participate in the CyberWarrior bootcamp. What are they used for? They're used to protect data and applications as well as infrastructure. And the way you could sort of look at this is, even though your data and systems might be in the cloud, they might be operating even something in your home. Some of you might be familiar with the fact that you have a thermostat that's connected to the internet in your home or your living space, and you can access that thermostat through your mobile browser, right? What's important there is to make sure that someone can't get in and interrupt your service. Talk a bit about the benefits of cloud security. The cloud is 24/7, so cloud security has to be 24/7 visibility, right? It sort of supports a concept of higher availability because some of that is built into cloud infrastructure and cloud services. It incorporates data security and some components of what they consider advanced threat detection. Let's talk a little bit about threats and risks related to cloud security, because without threats and risks, there would be no need for security, right? So what are those threats and risks? Well, in the cloud, much of the services that are provided and your applications work with, they work with things called APIs. And in most cases, they're considered web application APIs, which is application programming interface. It's basically the language at which applications can communicate and talk together. Then you have this notion of data breaches. Well, why is that important? Well, in concept of APIs, and if they're insecure, if behind the API, there is an insecure data source that might have sensitive or other types of information, well, data breaches can occur because an attacker may target that insecure API and pull out certain data or access other services that will allow it to reach that sensitive data, which should be better protected. You could have the concept of misconfigured cloud services, right? This is a risk. And that means, I'm sure you've heard in the news, some company left files on an S3 bucket and someone was able to find those files and sort of that risk there is if you don't understand cloud security very well, someone may choose to store files in a location, whether the password be weak, maybe it doesn't have any protection, whatever the means may occur. And this is more about what you would learn as part of the program. You learn how to properly configure cloud services. And another risk here is lack of control. So in some cases, you could have the concept of lack of control, and that would lead to an attacker abusing that lack of control, or what be optimistic for the attacker to leverage that risk that exists in the cloud. And hence we have here at least 4. And what we'll talk about more is a sort of large number of more risks that might occur or might be inherent by using cloud services. Now, an important point here is that just because a company wants to use cloud services doesn't mean that that's a problem. It just means that professionals, cybersecurity professionals, need to understand and communicate to the company, to their provider, to their clients, whatever that may, the value of addressing these risks, which enhance security, and that will enable you as a professional to gain tremendous amounts of opportunity and jobs. Let's talk a little bit more about data breaches. So a data breach occurs clearly when a hacker gains some type of access, right? In some cases, you would consider the hacker had a username and password. They were not really authorized to use that username and password, so they gain unauthorized access. In other cases, an attacker could have access and then gain additional access to certain types of information. In the most concerning case is sensitive information, right? And that leads to what is considered a data leakage and possibly a data breach situation. What you hear about in the news that, someone's social security numbers or other types of sensitive information was leaked from some other organization. That's considered a data breach. Insecure APIs. We talked about this a little bit and why it's one of the major concerns in cloud computing. In some aspects, APIs are complex. They have sophisticated programming languages, maybe some sophisticated authorization and authentication mechanisms that are used, and they're designed to access services. Their main goal is to integrate APIs with other companies or provide data to applications. In the simplest perspective, when you go to Amazon.com, you might be dealing with the API for their order tracking or order purchasing system, right? Amazon doesn't want fraudulent purchases, so they're going to try and secure that API, which interacts with your browser or your mobile application, as best as possible to make sure that usage of applications and databases are appropriate. And we also mentioned a little bit about misconfigured cloud services. And I gave the example of, something like S3. You've probably also heard the news about misusage or misconfiguration in box.com or other types of services like that, or maybe even someone sharing a Google file or an image, a picture or something with someone else. Using the technology in the most secure way is a skill, and that's what you'll learn at CyberWarrior. We also talked a little bit about lack of control, right? So cloud service providers have control over their physical logical security, right? They have data centers who may employ physical security guards, and that's how they, incorporate that into their physical security strategy. They also might have some sophisticated technology to prevent a VM from talking to another VM, which is a virtual machine, or the virtual representation of a computer in the cloud. At a higher level, they might also have some sophisticated technology in place to track the communication of containers to other containers, which are software-based representations of instances of applications in the cloud, right? So this is all talks about system management, ownership, and ultimately control. And a cloud provider does a good job of implementing some of those capabilities, but it's also any company or consultant or technical resources that help someone put systems or enable systems in the cloud has to also understand that control over your systems and control over your data is an important characteristic and our security risk that needs to be addressed. Okay, so let's jump into a little bit about best practices. Clearly, any system, authentication and access, right, is very important, right? So in cloud environments, you have something called IAM. You might also have a term called CIAM. There's all these types of technologies that are being developed for different use purposes that enable sophisticated access for the integration and use of interoperability between applications and the cloud. And like I mentioned, since the world has gone more to usage of the internet and HTTPS, most of that interoperability is done through secure APIs, mobile applications, and web browsers. Some of the other best practices for cloud are data protection. And one mechanism to do that is to enforce encryption. Encryption has many different use cases. You might have encryption on the communication from your computer to the application. You might have encryption on a file that is stored in the cloud in a object bucket, right? There's many different use cases. You also might encrypt a piece of data like a password in a database to sort of further protect that information, and can occur at different levels. So encryption could have many different applications, and part of your security architecture would help you to better understand how to apply encryption and to make sure companies, when you sort of gainfully employed, you can ensure that your company is following the best practices for encryption and ensure that you maintain primarily regulatory compliance. Sure, everyone's heard of something called GDPR or CCPA, and possibly in your state, wherever you're located, they're developing and rolling out additional localized data protection policies and acts and legislation, right? So data protection is becoming an increasing concern, and authentication and access and encryption are important tools that cloud best practices can use to help secure that information. Additionally, part of cloud security is advanced or readily available, or in the case of the concept cloud, utility provided security monitoring and logging. Most of the times, companies have a difficult time acquiring security monitoring and logging capabilities and implementing it, on their on-premise systems. But cloud environments incorporate advanced security monitoring and logging capabilities, and you can learn as part of the bootcamp how to apply those concepts and implement those tools and capabilities to help achieve data protection. Another component of data protection is disaster recovery and business continuity. Disaster recovery helps you recover from a problem, and business continuity helps you maintain business operations in an understood and practical manner. The cloud incorporates disaster recovery and business continuity practices as part of its infrastructure and affords users and companies and technicians and professionals advanced tooling to do sophisticated capabilities so that you could either replicate data across sites within the same location, or you could replicate data across regions, from the East Coast of the US to the West Coast, or replicate data and services even from the US to another country, depending on your needs and applications for your business. So these are some of the best practices for cloud security. So let's dive into some of the descriptions, right? So authentication and access control, definitely vital for cloud security because they verify user identity. In an internet world, identity has become a very big topic. I referred to something called IAM, Identity and Access Management. It helps better identify, validate, verify that user, and control in a best manner possible how an identity can access the appropriately assigned resources. Encryption and data protection, right? So as I mentioned, right, this is a technology that helps to secure the transmission of data and the protection of data at rest. We also have security monitoring alert and logging. As I mentioned, we refer to security monitoring logging in the cloud. It's continuous, and without continuous monitoring, we wouldn't see, changes in behavior and things of that nature. But from a security perspective, what some of the advanced security monitoring and logging can do is identify suspicious activity, such as an unauthorized access, maybe an attempt or a malware infection or other security threats. One of the ones that probably everyone is aware of, if you have Google or Microsoft email, is once in a while, you might get an alert, even if you signed into your email from another location or another device. Google might, send you an email and say, double confirm, or we just wanted to let you know that this happened, right? So that is continuous monitoring. And as I mentioned, disaster recovery and business continuity. These are critical infrastructure components of cloud security and also important procedural components of cloud security. They're also critical to business operations. Having the ability to sustain business interruptions is important, but also having the ability to back up your data and recover if there is some type of activity that modifies that data inappropriately, or maybe you made a change that needs to be corrected, is critical to continued business operations. All right, so let's dive into cloud control.
Wait, we have a question in the chat, David.
Oh, we have a question.
On a daily basis, am I watching a monitor for threats?
So yes, as part of a cybersecurity professional, that is one of your responsibilities. The other part of your job in regards to threats is you might be alerted to some type of situation that needs further investigation. So you might be notified to investigate some type of threat before you can sort of deem it as a problem. You'll go through sort of a checklist or some type of methodology to analyze that, much like you would walk into a hospital and the nurse is, checks you out. From a security perspective or security operations perspective, you'll have a playbook to follow to investigate that threat, and it might be classified for you already, or your job is to classify it and then determine whether that's a problem or not. Maybe you have to notify the right people, but there is a procedure, or there would be a procedure for you to follow to understand that threat and act on it appropriately. Hope that answered your question. Okay. So
and don't be afraid to be verbal, you guys, instead of just typing into the chat. Really, we want this to be a dialogue. So don't hesitate to raise your hand and ask that question verbally. So go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
No worries. So cloud controls matrix covered a vast amount of controls. You'll see here 133 that govern these particular areas or domains within what's called the CSA Cloud Security Alliance framework. And what's important here is you'll see human resources security all the way to governance and risk management incorporating data center security and things we pointed out, encryption, additionally key management, business continuity, things of that nature. So there's more than just those top 4 or 5 risks that we talked about. There are a plethora, and hopefully that's the right term. There will be a lot of risks related to each category or each domain here. And just for example, because I'm sure a lot of people have a mobile device, is you might get a text message on your mobile device. So how do you understand, if you don't know who that individual is, whether they've sent you a link and it might be a tiny URL or some other shortened link? How do you know if that's valid or not? Well, that's a risk, right? That's a threat to you as a user, and a risk if you click on that link and you wind up in a site that could possibly ask you for your username and password and then potentially store, sort of steal your password. Additionally, you might download a piece of software from some site, maybe not Apple or Google Play, but you download a piece of software onto your device and that has malware or other things in it. And we can go on for a long time. We probably don't have much time in this call, but if anyone has any particular questions they'd like to answer, all of these categories are designed to collectively identify the areas of focus inside the cloud controls matrix. So from a perspective of users of cloud, you have what's called a customer, and then you might have what's called a provider, or in this case, AWS. AWS has a responsibility for security of its cloud, meaning the services and infrastructure and software that it's offering the customer. And then the customer have what's called the responsibility in cloud, meaning if a customer puts a file in the cloud, the customer has to ensure that they have configured the settings and monitoring and other capabilities as mentioned appropriately to ensure that that data is appropriately protected. And what is referred to between this relationship is a shared security model, right? So just because you put your files in the cloud doesn't mean that they're automatically secure. Just because you started a database in the cloud and started putting your data there does not mean that is automatically secure, that there needs to be some understanding of those 133 controls just mentioned in previous slide to ensure that that customer data using the platform and the operating system and those other elements mentioned up there about client-side data, server-side encryption, network traffic protection are using the infrastructure as a service appropriately, which could include the SaaS, software as a service, software, or the compute and storage database networking systems in the cloud, i.e. the hardware, to make sure that that information is protected. And as you mentioned here before, and I talked a little bit about it, is something like AWS refers to regions as locations that are geographically significantly dispersed, and availability zones as areas that have multiple and separate data centers in a locality that is near. So for an example, AWS may have an East Coast region and a West Coast region, and they might identify it as US East 1 or US West 1. But inside US East 1, there could be multiple availability zones. And then to further support the operation of applications and offer some sophisticated application delivery and security mechanisms, AWS refers to what they call edge locations as ways that they could distribute web applications and things of that nature through concept of a content delivery network or edge locations that offer faster connectivity for someone who might not be readily connected or in short distance to one of their availability zones or regions. So this is, there's a lot to talk about here, right? There's a lot to take in. So how do you create a cloud security roadmap or implementation roadmap? Okay, so as part of, we could take a look at it from a phased approach. So as part of phase one, meaning the first phase, we start with the foundation. And in any approach, it's good to take a phased and foundational approach. The first part, as a professional, is the first thing that should come to your mind is, what are the regulatory requirements? And do I have to understand these regulatory environmental concerns to set up and operate cloud security? Then, as I mentioned, right, you have the shared security responsibility model. What are the parts that the implementer needs to consider? And then how are you going to ramp this up in parallel to achieve your application of regulatory controls and your implementation from a customer and platform perspective? As part of phase two, right, you might start to implement security in the cloud. And that is, you apply the certain benchmark, some baseline of controls or baseline of configuration. And you're going to sort of identify or establish your cloud security model. Then in phase three, you probably have something operating already. You're going to want to optimize your setup or configuration. And how you do that is you perform a risk review. And what a risk review does is help you to better understand how you can optimize your configuration, your services, or utilize more effectively your strategy of delivering or supporting or implementing your system in the cloud. So here's sort of a long tail view, how this might sort of unfold from sort of a scheduling perspective. You meet a foundational team, an implementation team, and an optimization team. And maybe as part of your approach, depending how complicated your implementation or your infrastructure needs to be, you can deal with regulatory framework and your shared responsibility understanding as part of your first, 3 months or first quarter. Then you could, as part of maybe half of the first quarter into half of the second quarter, you're really addressing or understanding your skills ramp up, because maybe you understand your responsibility now and you need to get more information about how to be more skilled in configuring or utilizing a particular cloud. Then you could sort of step into this implementation phase and move on. Once you're done with implementation, is to fine tune and optimize. And part of that is look back at what you've got from a risk perspective and understand how you might approach, from an attacker's perspective, someone who might want to, misuse your system or misuse your configuration. And that would be considered an attack simulation. So are there any questions thus far? I want to show you one more thing here before we sort of dive into questions. I know we have 20 minutes left. Let me show you one more thing. So recently, the Cloud Security Alliance, which manages CCM, has released a newer version, and it's not fully adopted yet, version 4. But here, hopefully you can see my Excel spreadsheet. Can you see my Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So you can download this download this file yourself, and you could sort of take a look at the structure, controls, which we mentioned, an implementation guideline, things about auditing, and some other characteristics, and also dive into an understanding of those 133 controls, right? From audit and assurance area to application and infrastructure security. And what you'll see here is an explanation. And most importantly, when we get to the bottom, is a significant increase of control coverage right? That governs how many particular details you would want to understand, investigate, and assess as a security professional, right? And it gives you a little understanding, but from, a value add point of view, if you were to participate in the CyberWarrior security boot camp, you would gain a better understanding of each particular element and how it applies. So we mentioned a little bit about storage encryption. You would understand more about those details, how to implement it, assess and test it, so you can achieve this specification, protect information from unauthorized disclosure on managing endpoint devices with storage encryption. And that's just an example of one particular use case that would govern what's mentioned before out of those long list of categories and 133 controls as part of the matrix. I think at this point, we could say we are done and maybe we can open it up for questions.
Questions and then we're going to do a quick Kahoot, I think. Who's up? Alexandra.
So after we go through the 6-month course and we get a job and we're working, if we have a question when we're actually working, are we able to still reach out to the teachers of this course or no?
We encourage you to communicate for life. So the simple answer is yes. That was a long drawn out way to say we really want you to be part of a CyberWarrior family where we help you on going through your career. Maybe you'll want to help out future alums that come after you, that type of thing. We want to create it like a college alumni association at some level. So yes, we will help you with questions that you're struggling with, so that you don't have to go to your boss and say, hey, I have no idea what you're talking about here.
Okay, thank you.
So here's a good example of that. I think recently someone asked about the effects of cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. That might be an advanced topic, but someone reached out to us and we sort of gave them feedback about that particular topic.
So, and just to piggyback on that, it doesn't matter what level or anything. This is a guy that David's referencing that's got a pretty good job at a Fortune 500 company, and he needed our help, and we want to give him that help. So it's no big or small question is irrelevant to us. Other questions? Let's not be shy.
Mr. Edwards, I'd like to piggyback off of Alexander's great question as well too. It's like I have students just reach out to me that they graduated last year. So it, like Mr. Edwards says, and like Mr. David said as well too, it is a family. You can always ping me for ideas and such like that. My students don't do it all the time. They're like, they send presentations over to me and they're working and they're like, can you give me the sanity check? And that's what we're here for. Like the community itself, the cybersecurity community, the information technology community is huge. And unlike other communities where they kind of eat their own, we support each other a lot. Like we definitively want to grow each other. It's like very siloed in different industries. I work in procurement in a different time frame, and it was just like everybody for themselves. Here, it's a very collaborative, open environment, and there's no other community that literally has an open source community where you're validating, different software, using software, and putting suggestions and stuff. So, fantastic question, though.
So other questions, or should we jump to a Kahoot real fast? Anybody else? Okay, Isaac. Let's do an abbreviated Kahoot, 10 minutes or so. You guys, this is an example of how we, in a fun way, and yes, some will think, well, this is kind of elementary school-esque, and it's really not. It is designed to make sure that you are comfortable with what you've learned in a fun and friendly competitive environment.
So hello everybody. Nice to meet you all. It's nice to see those happy faces. I would love to see more faces though. We want to encourage you guys to get to know us, and we to get to know you guys too. So let's do now one of my favorites sides, right? And it's doing Kahoots. Just if you just hearing Kahoot for the first time, a Kahoot is just a quiz, but really, really fun, right? So there's no good or bad answer here. There's no good or bad response. It's just having fun at the end of the day, right? So when we study here in cybersecurity, when we give the boot camp, we also like to have fun in classes, and this is one of the best way to do it. So really quick, there's two ways in which you can access the Kahoot. You can access it through the website with the link I'm going to share on the chat, or you can just download the app called Kahoot, just like that. So what is going to happen is that you're going to just click on that link or log in through the application, and I will give you a code that will get you into our Kahoot. So let me start off by sharing my screen, and we start from there. So we do start here, and now we share this screen.
Come on, you guys, don't be shy. This experience is designed to give you guys a sense of what and how you will learn. It is, you can't be shy about this. Just like any educational initiative, if you think you're going to put your laptop under your pillow and you're going to learn it at night when you're asleep, you're just mistaken. Again, so please get involved with this. It's supposed to be fun. We take what we are teaching and what you are learning very seriously, but we try not to take ourselves collectively too seriously all the time. So this is a fun way to gauge how much you're learning. And again, it was 45 minutes from, or 40 minutes from David. So we don't expect you to be experts, but we want to give you a flavor for how this all works, and hope you like it so far, and hopefully you'll like this as well.
Let's get this going. Good luck, everybody. Cloud security. Our first question is a true or false. So in the shared responsibility module, the cloud provider is responsible for customizing cloud features. Is this true or is this false?
Customizing cloud features.
Let's see what you guys say. So you just have to select the answer based on where you're playing, and that's it. There you go. So in the share responsibility module, you have two phases here. You have the customer and you have the cloud provider. In the in talking about the responsibility of customizing cloud features, in this case, that's a job from the customer itself, other than the cloud provider. So that's why in this case, this question is false. But let's see. So align analytics on the board, and on to the next one. What is a data breach? What is a data breach? You will have to read very careful here, but let's see. Right, for answers, come on, 5, there we go. 6, there we go. And boom, oh, good job. Most of you got it there. So yeah, keyword here is breach with unauthorized. Whenever you hear the word breach, in this case data, right? You're talking about unauthorized and sensitive information. That's the keywords right there to know that definition. So good job. Good job. Okay. There goes the scoreboard. All right, 3 more to go. And we have verified the identity of users and applications and determine which resources they can access. What is that? So David mentioned it. So let's see if you guys can get this one right. Verify the identity of users and applications. What are we talking about? Ooh, nice. I love it. Authentication and access control. Not much things to explain here, but great job. All of you got it. That's nice. All right. So Alexis is on the board, but I'm gonna tell you something. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. So let's see how this goes. Fourth, APIs are used to connect different components of a cloud system, such as cloud applications, databases, and servers. Is that true or is that false? Come on, come on. Come on, Ross, you're pretty in front of 2 seconds and boom. That's true. That is extremely true. It's literally one of the definitions of the API. So, all right. All right. So this is looking very, very close. And this is how I like it. So on to the last questions. A good practice to ensure cloud security is the continuous monitoring for any suspicious activity. Is that true or is that false? A good practice is to ensure the continuous monitoring for any suspicious activity. Nice, I love it. That's true. Let's see the final scoreboard though. So on the third spot, we have Elaine. Congratulations. Second spot, we have Chris. And on the first spot, 5 out of 5. Oh my God. We have Alexis. So congratulations. Then we have Ja and Talaine. But you see, it's fun. It's fun. So congratulations to everybody.
Very nice, you guys. Very nice. So that gives you a sense, I hope that gives you a sense of what our class accomplishes. Obviously, it's simplified. There's a lot more involved. You learn in our program beyond cloud security. You learn penetration testing. You learn basic security analysis. You learn firewalls, IDPS, vulnerability management, incident response, a number of other skills that you will be required to know in a variety of different functions, job functions within cybersecurity. Not all the skills you learn will be applicable to each job function, but what we're going to provide you is a foundation that allows you then to figure out what your passion is within cybersecurity, and maybe that passion is connected to what you currently do in your life. Maybe again, maybe you're a project manager. Maybe you are a writer, and you're going to use your writing skills for compliance work within cybersecurity. Do not dismiss what you already know and what you bring to the table, because that is critically important. The customer interface. If you are really good with people, you know how to string 5 sentences together all at the same time, then maybe you go into pre-sales engineering and make more money than anybody else, an ungodly amount of money, if you're good at it. So don't be shy about understanding what skills you bring to the table, learning the cybersecurity skills, and then combining those to really share with a hiring manager and show a hiring manager what you're made of. The last thing to think about is you're trying to conceptualize what and I'm biased, so take it with a grain of salt. I think everyone here should be learning cybersecurity because we need the talent. We have a talent gap, and if you're any good at what you do, you will have a job in cybersecurity. But to give you perspective, so you don't talk yourself out of a career, because it comes up a lot. One of the things we do, just for context, we every Wednesday bring all of our cohorts together, and we have 5 or 6 going on simultaneously. We bring them all together for what's called Career Ambassador Wednesday, where you get a presentation from a leader in cybersecurity. Sometimes it's someone who's just getting yelled at by a boss, but usually it's someone who is the boss yelling. And it really informs you about what different options you have. And it talks about career paths. It talks about imposter syndrome. It talks about a variety of different things, what hiring managers are looking for. And one of the best pieces of advice I have now came from, I forget who it was, but the question was, I don't come from IT. I don't come from cybersecurity. Why should someone hire me? I don't think they will. And the guy said, why are you doing the hiring manager's job for them? Because when you decide to not apply for a job because you don't think you're qualified, you are doing the hiring manager or HR person's job for them. You are self-selecting. Like you tried out for the baseball team and you cut yourself. You don't do that. You let them decide whether you've got the chops or not for the job. And they may say you don't have the chops for this job, but they may like you enough where they go, what about this job? It really varies. But if you self-select out, you're done. And that's not true just for cybersecurity, it's true for anything. So as you think about whether you're going to do this, and I hope you do, you really want to not self-select yourself out of this option. You will get a job. If you're any good. If you don't attend class, if you don't follow our strategy, if you don't connect with our speakers, which is invaluable every Wednesday, then you might not get a job. You have to trust our strategy and you have to say, okay, I've committed to this. I'm going to do it. Don't put your laptop under your pillow. Do the homework. Do the prep work. Go the extra mile. It may not be a fun 28 weeks, but it'll be a rewarding 28 weeks, especially at the end of when you land the job. So put it into perspective. Trust us, and you're going to learn a lot more than what David showed you. A lot more. Before David leaves, does anybody have any questions for him or me or Isaac or anybody? We're at the hour, and I want to be cognizant of people's time. Yes, Alexandra.
So I'm not like very good with math. I mean, I obviously know like some basic computer skills. Do you think I would still be able to kind of get through the course? I mean, I'm getting my master's in clinical psychology currently. So I mean, I am, intelligent, but I don't know if I'm intelligent in the way that cybersecurity is looking for per se, but.
I'll let David talk about that a little bit, but I know we've had many speakers, they're CISOs, who have said, I stink at math. They stink at math. Now, do they need to muddle through it? Of course they do at times, but you don't have to be. Again, well, David, why don't you take that because you know the nuts and bolts better than I do about math skills.
So I wouldn't lie a little bit. The fundamentals of a computer are math, but the practical nature of cybersecurity has to do with some math, but not advanced math. And I don't think that it sort of defines somebody to be a calculus. You don't have to take calculus or things of that nature to become a cybersecurity professional. An important part of the understanding is there are some 52 or 55 job classifications and probably more now under the umbrella of cybersecurity or security engineer. So there are many different pathways that someone could eventually take and pursue from a job. It doesn't necessarily have to be math oriented.
Thank you.
And Alexander, that I had mentioned before the compliance piece, and I'm going to stereotype and people who are long lived cybersecurity people might get offended at this. I know a lot of cybersecurity people who don't know how to write at all. Now, if you're getting a master's degree in psychology, you probably have written a sentence or two in your time. As years go by and government mandates become stricter and stricter, compliance and the ability to write and understand cybersecurity, but also deliver the information and the history of what a company or organization has done is increasingly becoming important. So yes, what David's saying is true about the foundation of this, but understand your other skills, because those are critically important. We've had a speaker, she essentially does analytics. in cybersecurity. It's data. Is she a cybersecurity expert by any stretch of the imagination? No, and she admits that. But she knows enough to be able to tie her skills to what she is really good at. Again, pre-sales engineers, and I use that as the example. They don't know enough about. They don't know as much as an analyst about cybersecurity skills, but they know enough where they can help with that pitch and bring home a lot of business to their employer. So
Okay,
really, what's
Let
that?
me add something. So someone just posted in there in the chat about cryptography or encryption. And something like that could have a sophisticated level of math to implement that cryptographic algorithm. But that doesn't mean the operator or the person performing, the cybersecurity job or task needs to understand the math behind that algorithm, right? Your job actually is not to create sophisticated encryption techniques, because that's really a skill that's really far down the expertise level and associated to the math that you had mentioned. The majority, 99% of jobs related to encryption are to pick the right level or type of encryption. And as Jonathan mentioned, maybe as you're doing risk assessments, is to understand, hey, is this type of encryption, and a typical one is SHA-256 or AES 256. You don't have to understand the math behind that bit representation and how long it might take someone to decrypt such encryption, although you might find that's cool and something you learn as a cybersecurity professional. You just learn all about that kind of stuff separately. It's not a job requirement to learn how to break AES 256. Your job is to 99% of the time, making sure that is implemented correctly, and also to double check that if at certain time, and this is the interesting part of cybersecurity, is that certain requirements, certain implementations go through life cycles, is to make sure that you go through the process of advising people what's the right level to upgrade to. And there are all kinds of catalogs and resources, and that's part of the training, that direct you how to make those best decisions. I think understanding the math might be cool, and I can see how you might take a step back in regards to that. Some people really find that interesting. Believe me, there's way smarter people than I trying to figure that out, right? Than someone who's really doing the other, not the 1%, but the 99% of all the cybersecurity related activities.
Okay. Any other questions? We are 6 minutes over right now, so. But please, you guys, be in touch with us. Yeah, David, go ahead. Or are you waving goodbye? Oh, yeah, he was. Please be in touch with us. It is a rewarding experience. It's a rewarding journey. We are here to help. I'm not saying it's going to be easy always. You also need a certain level of specs on your computer. You absolutely need 8 gigabytes of memory, preferably 16, because we download virtual machines, and a virtual machine is a memory suck. So that's important. Also, 256, 256, and what was the other number, Isaac?
i5 core for the CPU.
Okay. All right. Most new computers will have these things. The memory, they don't make computers with 4 gigabytes anymore, I don't think. But the other stuff is pretty standard with any new computer, with one that's been within the last couple of years. But make no mistake, you cannot do this on your phone. Don't waste your money or your time. You cannot do this on your phone. If you think you're going to, you're mistaken. You also cannot do this with a basic iPad tablet. But other than that, you are good to go. But you can always check with staff what you need. 16 gig memory is wonderful because it's just fast, and you're not panicked about being slow or behind. But you got to do the prep work, you got to do the homework. You just have to. It doesn't matter what kind of computer you have. If you're not willing to put in the time, you're not going to succeed. And again, it's my job to maximize the number of people who are in this program, but it's also my job to make sure that people are successful in the program. And if you're not going to put the time into it, I think you should, but that just requires a gut check on your part. 28 weeks. Yeah, it's tough. You know, your friends are going to call you and say, hey, let's go out for drinks tonight. No, you can't. You got to go to class. Or, you know, you're going to miss reading your child a story before he or she goes to bed, that kind of thing. Yeah, that stinks. But it's really worth it. So, did you have another question, Alexandra?
Yeah, just how much homework and like how many exams are typically given? Is it like one assignment kind of per day or once a week?
Well, think about it this way. It's 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. Think about a college or a graduate level class. You meet for 3 to 4 hours a week.
Yeah.
So if you miss a class in a night, you're missing a week of class. Now, we do record everything. So if you miss class, you can go back and watch the recording, and that recording is posted within 24 hours of the class finishing. So, but we don't encourage you can't ask recording questions. It is probably an hour-ish a night of prep work, making sure you understand what's going on, and then over the course of a week, another 10-ish to 14 hours of additional work that doesn't necessarily have to happen right before that next class. Some does, but other times it's just homework. It's repetition to make sure you work on the skills. So it's let's say it's between 5 and 20 hours a week of work. But it's at least the 5, if not more. There is, and it's not assignments necessarily, there are labs. We are very lab driven. So we ask you, when you do a lab, you take a screenshot of the completed lab and you submit that, because that's the only way we can give you feedback. And we will give you feedback. And if you don't get feedback, you let me know and I will make sure you get the feedback. But the labs are important so we can know that you understand the practical application. There are also 6 capstone projects in each program, in each 6-month program. And the capstone projects build upon each other. They're building blocks. They're the coolest and most fun part of the program, because you really do see, it's all coming together now. The last capstone project is an oral presentation capstone project with other people in your class that you present to all cohorts combined on a Wednesday Career Ambassador night. Those capstone projects and the labs to a lesser extent should be, if you were a graphic artist, or if you were Vincent van Gogh and you were walking around trying to find a job, you carried those paintings with you constantly. They're the equivalent of your portfolio. So you can show hiring managers, these are the skills that I have. This is what I can add to your team tomorrow if you are smart enough to hire me. Okay, so don't take it as a nervousness thing, but it's just like any educational initiative. You gotta pass in work, because that's the only way we can provide feedback in terms of you understanding what you know and what you need to work on. Anything else?
Yep. Louis and Alex has their hand raised too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Luis. Yes, Alain Marcus did remind me that leaders get yelled at too.
Sorry, it
anything-
happens all the time.
Right. Okay. Alexis, you have a question?
Yes. So I wanted to know, like, going into the class is like not going in, but like prior to the class, is there anything that we could do to help us be more prepared? Like as far as studying or
Yeah, Johnny, are you still here? No. Understanding operating.
No, he left.
What's that, Isaac?
Yeah, he left.
Understanding operating systems probably is not a bad idea. That's probably the thing you want to do best. Understand, we teach you a lot of networking, but understanding foundational skills about understanding terminology is important to understand. But the biggest thing is to make sure you can manipulate a keyboard so that you're not being asked to do something and the rest of the class is 5 steps ahead and you're still trying to figure out how to drop and drag. That type of thing. But yeah, understanding operating systems can certainly help. And what we're going to do this time around for students who enroll in the next class we have starting is April 3rd. We'll send a sort of a cheat sheet of prep work that people can or can't do, but it certainly can't hurt. Okay.
Thank you. I can't wait to start that class.
Wonderful. That's what we like to hear. And by the way, you guys, you will always be working with each other. You learn a lot from your instructor, but you will learn people in your class as well. One day, I'm gonna pick on Alexis. One day, Alexis is gonna struggle, and Alexander is gonna say, "Oh no, this is how you do it. This is easy." And then the next day, Alexander's gonna be like, "Oh, this is awful."
Hello,
And
can anybody hear me?
yeah, I understood this really easily. You learn from each other. We set you up. Everyone gets a Discord channel, and before I started with CyberWarrior 3+ years ago, I had no idea what Discord was. But we have Discord channels for all of our cohorts and community ones as well. It is a great vehicle for you guys to learn from each other. You will have questions and other people will have answers for you. It's just a world of good. Somebody will have taken the Security Plus exam and they'll come back and say, hey, be on the lookout for this. This was tough, this wasn't. This caught me by surprise based upon our class, etc. But you will thrive on each other's support. And in every class, there will be a couple rock stars. I promise you there will be a couple rock stars. And when you find them, you attach yourself like a leech. Because it really does help, because they're going to give you a perspective that a student can give, but an instructor cannot give. Are we good? You guys, take down, I don't know if all of you guys are in our database, probably you are, but if you have questions, email Clara Gill. Oops. Hold on. Email Clara Gill or Miles Harvey. They will be able to answer all your questions. Okay, but it'd be great to have you involved. April 3rd is the next start date. And that's it. And again, this is my email address in case anybody ever has any questions. Although they're going to answer more questions than I ever will pretend to answer. Okay.
Yep. I also saw Louis had a question earlier. He had a problem with the microphone, so I don't know if he's back.
He's back. He's been back and forth. Louis, are you back?
I think he's typing it.
If I have a laptop, which would be the best, it doesn't matter. Isaac, you can answer that better than I can. What type of laptops do people use typically in this class?
To answer that, actually, I had to say, I just need to tell you which laptops you can use. So you can't use like a Chromebook because this is just not acceptable. You will not be able to do any other labs or anything like that through it. So I would say just search a laptop with those characteristics that Jonathan just said. 8 gigabits is the minimum of RAM, but if you can get it, if you can get one up to 16, that'll be the best thing you can do. Also 256 of storage as minimum. More more storage, totally fine. But as minimum, we require that. And for the processor, an i5 of Intel or AM, if you are an AMD fan, AMD Ryzen 5, something like that is what we're looking for. So if you do not have a laptop and you want to purchase one for the course, what I would say is to try to purchase a one that has Windows operating system on it. Not saying Mac cannot work, but preferably you wanna have a Windows.
But Macs do work. Let's not.
Yeah, it does. It does.
I've got a Mac and I know I could do that. So,
Exactly.
Alexander, I see an A on your coffee cup. Does that mean? And it looks like a coffee cup I know from Amherst College. Are you affiliated with Amherst College? No, okay.
It's just a.
All right. Oh, okay. There you. That's a fair point. Okay. All right, you guys. That's it. Any other questions? Email those names that I put in the chat, and I hope to see all of you joining us on the 3rd of April. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Take care.